Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Yes.
Last one.
Let's do it. 16 of 16. 31 of 32 if you're listening to these broken up, which I think is probably a better way to consume them ultimately.
So the nightmare, and it's not like this affected me personally or like I didn't sleep that night, but the nightmare scenario was doing the Colts, preview 5 years ago, and then Andrew Luck retiring like 2 days later. So we went 1-1 on that. We pre-recorded the Cardinals thing, and then they kind of went weird with the quarterback situation. That said, maybe I call that a push instead of a loss. Like, it's not like our outlook for the Cardinals drastically changed.
I think we even talked that through.
We said it doesn't matter who starts.
No, we were basically like, what if is there a chance Dobbs goes week 1? And we didn't know Colt McCoy was going to get cut, but we definitely talked about we don't really know who the starter is going to be till Murray comes back.
It was messy, but we also did get we saved the Niners one long enough for the
resolution.
It was Purdy, but the Trey Lance trade happened. So and then real quick too, and I do got to give a shout out to the guys. I said I'd do this because I'm also going to be live drafting in a super flex league while we do this. So shout out to League Sync and Draft Hero, 4for4 products, because otherwise I'd be super fucked in doing fantasy drafts in general, but it's super nice. And there's even an Andy promo code if you want any of those fantasy football products. It's going to be in the show notes. I think it's just Andy10, and I think it's 10% off anything. So
awesome.
I'll let you take it. I'm up. I'm on the clock right now. So you need to talk.
Well, you mentioned getting ahead of the Trey Lance, or waiting out the Trey Lance trade. We're recording the Seattle Seahawks now. This is the Seahawks podcast. We're going to do the Niners next. That puts a bow on the team previews, and we're probably only at risk of getting caught by a surprise Nick Bosa trade. I don't have any inside scoop on that. I think that's just some nonsense info accounts who are floating floating stuff that they have no idea what's going on. I think Nick Bosa almost certainly plays for the Niners this year. Let's talk Seahawks, which I had a kind of a weird feeling reliving the 2022 Seahawks campaign. And I have a weird vibe about this team too, because through 3 weeks last year, the Seahawks proved that they were much better than their preseason market ranking. Much better. Defense, offense, both were substantially, more competitive than expected. And I would say the reason for that is they had a lot of draft capital and they hit on every single guy, which is rare, especially in recent Seahawks history. They have had a very tough time identifying elite talent in the draft. And that's especially apparent because we know if there's one thing that you can count on Pete Carroll to do well, it is to develop his young guys. He loves to get in there and be a teacher and be a mentor and be that's his leadership style, is like, let's get these young guys in, let's coach them up, let's get them excited to play, let's get them to leave it all on the field. And, they went through a long stretch where they just were not getting players that could contribute until last year, where everybody they grabbed, including the swings they took on Geno, they hit out of the park. And so mid-season-ish last year, it was like, wow, this team is a bet on. The market still doesn't believe in them. And I made some of my most sincerely held belief bets on the Seahawks through the middle of the season, and they came through for me a bunch. And before even doing that, I remember being like, God, man, Niners were kind of playing a little not as good as we thought they were going to be. The Rams looked like they were about to drive off a cliff. Cardinals were a shit show to start the season. And so it's like, wait, why is Seahawks 40-1 to win the NFC West? Like, these guys are live. Like, I definitely got on board even to that degree with the long shot prices to win the West. And then it became a little bit of trying to, wishful thinking that they actually could do that, because guess what? They struggled in the two games against the Niners. So
and a big part of what we talked about in the previews, I distinctly remember talking about how their defense played in 21, and it was this, no doubles kind of defense where they weren't going to let you get over the top and have big plays, but you could basically have anything else you wanted all the time, and it slows it down, like it avoids some of these huge plays, but they're bad defense.
Yeah,
things up a little. They found some nice pieces in the draft, but it still wasn't a good defense. It was just different, and it took a little longer for some other teams to figure out, oh, this is still very beatable in certain ways. They can't stop the run.
Yeah.
They're still very young in a lot of these secondary pieces. The defense and Geno took some steps back in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
And
injuries were involved in
both and obviously
the protection
with the injuries as well.
The protection devolved, the defense, since they missed a couple of bodies. Basically, the trenches you started to see cracks in the trenches, and again, because they were so poor at drafting in the years prior to last year's draft, they had no depth, none, and so the guys they were backfilling with stunk. I would say this: the dream of NFC West was over before Christmas. They lose on the 15th on that Thursday night game. That was the Pico top in terms of price on the Niners. I mean, on the Seahawks, as they went into that game at home against the Niners, and they were something like got bet to like 3, I think. And so then you're like, oh man, are they going to play their way out of the playoffs? The NFC's so weak. They got to get a wild card spot. Well, they did. And I dumped a bunch of money on them in the wild card round against the Niners, where they were catching like 9.5, 10 points. And I was like, come on, Brock Purdy's first playoff game, he's really going to give you double-digit cover? Okay. Well, he did. And it was all in the second half. And that game got away from them real quick.
I went back and looked at, I go back and look at box scores every time for all these previews, but I really had to go back and look at all the playoff games that were, between the two teams we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a 23-17 game with 2:31 left in the third.
Yep.
Seattle down by 6 in the red zone.
Yeah. The cover was right there for the taking.
I mean, not
and it all fell apart.
They were looking like they had a good chance at winning that game. Strip sack, lose the ball. I mean, it was competitive. But yeah, strip sack, lose the ball that you had in the red zone, going for the lead at that point. And honestly, it was one-way traffic after that. The late touchdown was just window dressing. That was kind of rough to kind of see that final score and think, like, I remember some good parts of that game. Was it really this bad? And yeah, it was kind of a downer to end the season. But overall, like, if you told me from where we started last season with a 5.5 as your win total, and hey, we're having a quarterback competition that involves Drew Lock in it. If you told me that's where you started and you ended up in the playoffs, you had a defensive, you had the runner-up in offensive rookie of the year. You had a defensive rookie of the year that I think he finished second or third. You had a really good draft.
Two excellent tackles as rookies.
You essentially, found your starting tackle tandem for hopefully a long time at this point. You ended up, you ended up finding some cornerbacks that are, at least worst case at depth guys for, a decent part of their rookie contracts. You found a couple good corners. You beat Denver. You went and beat Russ like that. Just taking most of the people at the beginning of the season, if you're a Seahawks fan, they would have just been like, "Hey, what if you're 1-16, but you beat Russell Wilson?" Like, yeah, honestly, I'll take that.
We'll take it.
So it was, and a piece you traded for, obviously not this year, but Jamal Adams basically didn't play.
Yeah.
Like he was out second quarter right off the bat, torn. Like that guy's probably not playing week 1 this year at this point, the way it's looking. So, I mean, you lost an important defensive piece right off the bat. You had a lot of youth. They wrote him off. They ain't right back though, Drew. So overall, like successful season. And I guess, I mean, when you looked at that 5.5 and asked me how I know what it was, I bet the other side of it, Pete Carroll, I mean, it's not quite to the level of the Mike Tomlin stuff, but the guy just doesn't have bad seasons.
Yeah.
Finds a way to get the most out of, like you said, young defenders. They seemingly just want to draft running backs constantly, but all of them turn out at least decent. And then, getting what you got out of Geno obviously was a massive boon.
Yeah. So here's the conundrum, Andy. This team surprised to the good last year on the basis of a bunch of young talent that's on cost-controlled contracts. They bring back Geno Smith. They and oh, by the way, they had 2 decent draft choices, 2 in the top 20, including 1 in the top 6, right? So once we get an idea of what else is going on in the NFC West, i.e. 2 teams that might truly stink out loud, and the third team in your division is figuring out what they're doing at the quarterback position and may start a guy that had elbow surgery 6 months ago. And you have all this draft equity. The question in April, May, when prices started dropping for NFC West was, what, these guys should be the bet, right? Like they're just going to get better in the draft. All the guys they drafted and developed last year are going to be a year better. They're bringing Geno back. They're going to have more weapons to work with. There's questions everywhere else in the division. So I don't really know why I'm not excited about these guys this year, but I'm really kind of not. Are you there?
I'm a little bit there too, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it. But I think the devil's advocate is obviously what we saw in the second half of the season from this defense. What you saw was some of the regression from Geno Smith, who still, by the way, had 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns. Like he won comeback player of the year. I know the joke was, what did he come back from sucking? But yeah, I mean, he's 32. He just kind of bounced around the league and he put up a season like that. I guess the regression at the quarterback spot and the worry that they still haven't fixed enough at this defense in a division that essentially the numbers are saying they can't win. Like it's the biggest gap. It's the biggest favorite as a division favorite. A division favorite that doesn't, goes into the season or goes into camp not even really knowing if they have a starting quarterback yet at this point. It's hilarious, but it feels like they're just so far ahead in this bottom-up rebuild, and it's still so far away from actually being like a contender that I can take seriously, deep into a playoff run. But man, I mean, that draft they had last year.
Yeah,
I don't. Everybody really likes to talk about the Saints, the Lattimore.
Yeah,
that was such a big draft. But Charles Croft, Abraham Lucas, your starting tackles in the first and third round.
Yeah, both
honestly,
guys are good.
The biggest one of the bigger disappointments here is Boye Mafe, the DN from Minnesota. We'll see if he can take a step forward. But you got Walker the third in the late. Mid second round there. He's, like you said, he was very good. If you extrapolated his numbers out, it was like a 1,200 yard kind of rushing season. You got Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen in the 4th and 5th round. You got Tyreek Smith, who I think is still on the team too, is a depth piece at defensive end. And I think even though the wide receivers they drafted are still on the team, like essentially you just went like 10 out of 10 as far as like, hey, these are either starters or depth pieces that are with the team still. And, I know maybe we'll touch on this further when we get into 2023, but man, like Witherspoon, JSN, Derek Hall as a pass rotation piece, Zach Charbonnet is a guy who just kind of fell into their lap. They got depth at the guard. They got depth at center. They got another rotational DT and DN. And then they went and drafted a second running back way too late in the draft. And honestly, he's on the roster right now too. Like they've done it a second year in a row where they went and got the guys in the spots they need. They still just they still just probably didn't improve enough on defense right off the bat to like excite me to say this team can greatly overperform again. It can take another step forward. You know,
so your question
I can't
is,
quite put my finger on it.
I that's kind of
a lot of it's Geno. I think
it sounds like we're in almost the same headspace here. Then, it's almost Geno, and for me at least, I guess we should just start there then, because you're right. His 2022 campaign came out of absolutely nowhere. He started all 17 games for this team. That was his first season as a full-time starter since 2014. In between that 2014 campaign with the Jets, where he was, old 24-year-old on a bad team with a bad scheme, he spent 15 through 2021 and only started in 5 games over that stretch. Now, if you're in practice, if you're the backup, if you're in camp and you're not like showing, like if you're not showing teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Chargers, the Seahawks, specifically, I guess the Seahawks had Russell Wilson, so it's not shocking that they would have kept him on the bench. But like, if you're not showing flashes that you could be this guy, then that's a little bit of signal, I guess, that this might have been a fluky year. Because if you're, the entire handicap around the Seahawks going forward was that a fluke? Was it a fluke? Was it related to schedule? Was it related to,
I read 3 different articles where they tried to try to compare it to something. And it's basically like, hey, this sort of thing doesn't happen. And now we've got 2 of these where, hey, Josh Allen sucked. And, he's a freak athlete, but he's just missing wide open passes and he needs to improve 5 things. It's like, oh shit, he did that? Oh my God, he's a top 3 quarterback. Like that doesn't happen. So I don't know. We're having these things where I don't know if we're taking this quantum leap forward in I don't want to say coaching, maybe development, where there are ways to fix things that we didn't think were fixable, especially at the quarterback position. It's like, hey, this is just not something we can fix 10 years ago. It's almost like medicine, except it's working on mechanics. Maybe, maybe some of the stuff where they're able to, I'm really speculating now, you see all this stuff in sports science where they're able to take these slow motion shots of you and fix mechanics, whether it's pitching, hitting, throwing the ball. There's, we'll see if we can fix Zach Wilson, Matt. That'll be the real one to prove it. But I don't know. It is so hard to put context to it because it's sort of thing that just doesn't happen at like 32. I mean, when it did, it was like, oh, this is Kurt Warner, and he just didn't get a shot before. This is Geno, who we saw play in the NFL.
He kind of didn't, though. He kind of didn't get a shot. I don't really remember his stint with the Giants at all. He only played in 2 games, started 1, and he stunk in that game. So it's tough.
And then that's where I'm wondering, is it something he had? Like you really phrased that well when you described what he was doing with the Jets. Like maybe it's just, hey, you're in the nature versus nurture. Like, hey, you landed in the wrong spot. We talk about this with Lamar all the time. You wonder where he'd be if he'd landed with, honestly, maybe 31 other teams. Sometimes it's the right situation for the right player. So I don't think he's gonna keep getting better, but if they can get 80% of hot Geno from the first half of the season, it's a team that can be in the discussion, obviously, to make the playoffs.
Okay, so let's put a finer point on this a little bit, because this is really all that matters. I mean, we can talk about kind of this is it. Okay, so it's important to recognize that in the range of outcomes, last year being a fluke is a possibility. It's also important to kind of dissect last year and say there was a little bit of a tale of 2 halves. Better in the first half, worse in the second half. I would look at the lesser performance in the second half, and I would ascribe a lot of that to interior offensive line breakdown. It felt like when he was under interior pressure early and often, and there were some games where he had virtually no chance to really let plays develop, that it really did start to kind of come apart for him. But over the first half, if you take the good half of the season when the Seahawks were relatively healthy, at least in the O-line, what he was doing felt sustainable, and that was what made the Seahawks a bet. And the reason it felt sustainable was because he was making very precise, sideline passes in the 15 to 25 yards down the field range, which meant he had like the perfect throw to really challenge the way defenses wanted to scheme, right? He wasn't really attacking much over the deep middle. He didn't really want that pass, actually. And that is kind of the way defenses conceptually were approaching the Seahawks based on, the years of Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah.
And so they kind of gave him...
Or the league in general.
The league in general, but particularly...
The way they were using safeties now.
Right. And so there was almost like a, hey, the league has evolved to stop this guy, and that guy's Russell Wilson. And you're this guy, and you kind of fit right.
I don't hate that.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you kind of fit right. You're still a little athletic. You're squirrely. You're scrambling. You're making plays out of structure. You're hitting really precise passing 15, 20 yards down the field. And so I think
there's no good analog for this. I just think of this meme where it's a picture of an owl, and it just says like barn owls. Once humans invented barns, and this owl is like, shit, yeah. It's just like, this fits. And yes, his how they structured the offense worked well. And honestly, I kind of like where we're going with this team. If the biggest question mark isn't oh my God, Geno was a one-hit wonder. The regression the second half of the season was real. Teams figured this out. This offensive coordinator really, really isn't, as forward thinking as we thought, because I think I like how they're building the roster.
Yeah.
I do like it. And, if we want to start to get into some of the offseason moves, I already mentioned the draft, and yeah, they still had needs. I was really curious. Obviously, we did the, I did the pod with Vegas Refund, and we had so yeah, it's all coming together. Dan knows what I'm talking about. But they were one of the biggest mysteries in the draft, and they could have gone a bunch of ways.
Yeah,
I guess I'm not mad that they went defense. I would have loved to see them just trade back and do stuff, but I kind of like that they went and got depth at the offensive line where they could use some. They said, hell with it, we're just drafting more running backs if you guys are going to let them drop beyond, where people thought those guys were going to go. And they, what was the biggest strength group of this entire team is probably like, oh my God, you guys, hell or high water, you still have a really good 1-2 at the wide receiver. They had a guy in JSN that had some injury issues, and he wasn't quite as fast at the combine, and he dropped a little, and they said, fuck it, we'll take him. We'll have a third receiver. And he kind of fits in really well here. Obviously, he's already been dinged up. He's out there in a hard cast right now practicing. We'll see if he plays week 1. I'm a little hesitant to proclaim him in for week 1. But between that and just going and getting a kind of resurgent Bobby Wagner and what they did in the draft, and God, I'm looking at the other moves they made. It's kind of like, let's keep giving weapons to Geno, and let's fix what we can, because this defense isn't like an overnight fix. We'll draft some young players. We'll try to we'll do it. We'll do what worked. Let's draft a secondary piece. Let's coach him up. And obviously, this guy is coming a lot more highly touted than some of the secondary pieces they've coached up over the years. And then go get fill in where we can, what we can on defense. Obviously, Draymond Jones. That helps with your pass rush. Bobby Wagner's a big deal. He played really well last year, kind of in a team that got forgotten a little. And obviously, it's not going to stop the run that much better than last year, but you're definitely going to make some improvements, you'd think. So it is weird.
Yeah, I think they should be the much better.
It is weird. And I again, a lot of that depends on this. And we sit back and we look at this in the second season and be like, oh man, Kobe Bryant didn't take a step forward, and Tariq, or we got to call him Reek. He's not Tariq anymore. It's just Reek everywhere. So Woolen, if those guys regress or take a, sophomore slump, second year, step back.
Yeah.
We have issues because there's so many of them. They all have to kind of at least progress a little. But yeah, the defense should be better just based on what they're going to put out in the field. And they actually have some nice depth in the secondary now. They almost have like too many pieces in the secondary, truthfully.
Yeah. So that's kind of why maybe that was like the start of being like, and it was the draft. And I am not cool on JSN at all. Like, yeah, that guy was elite. He comes out a year earlier. He's top 5. He's going above Garrett Wilson, who was your rookie of the year last year. I don't think that's controversial take at all. I think he couldn't come out a year earlier because of age rules, right? So he had to go back to school and he barely played.
Yeah, we're running into more and more of that where it's like, oh man, this kid's really good. He's just not allowed to play football yet.
Yeah. So I guess like I'm not cool on JSN. I just felt like, okay, so you're adding strength to strength, I guess, or just adding depth there. Okay, fine. Same thing with Witherspoon. Like, give me a team like the Lions taking Witherspoon. I'm like, nice. Boy, does that plug a friggin' hole. You put him in nickelback on this team, and I'm like, okay. It kind of feels like a little bit of draft capital that may have been a little wasted. I don't know. I mean, it's the
weird,
long-term plan to have him CB2 next to Reek. What's the plan?
The plan isn't super apparent, but I'm just going to trust. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to trust this brain trust that's done it in the past.
Yeah.
And I guess I look at that. I'm like, hey, you could take a pass rusher.
Yeah. So that's the thing, man.
Does the pass rusher like really make this defense that much better right off the bat? Like it
makes me more excited about the team. If they got a really good young pass rusher, and if they had gotten with pick 6, if they had gotten a really good young talented pass rusher, and with pick 20 or whatever, they had taken like the best interior offensive lineman or something, or a guy that could be, play multiple positions on the O-line, then maybe I feel a little bit differently about the draft, because then I feel like, man, you just plugged 2 holes with more young talent. You had a great track record recently of drafting talent. Like now I'm maybe like a little bit more excited that there's not an obvious weakness, but the to me at least, the lack of addressing the interior offensive line is concerning. And I think particularly pairing that with the fact that Geno was at his worst self when he was under interior pressure, that's a red flag. And I don't expect that there's an obvious reason that Geno will hasten or regress or any of that stuff. Like he may, he might be more like, if you shuffle the performances we saw last year, and that's an average year from him, it's not just, a good half and a bad half. That may be what you see this year. But
I'm not as worried.
I've heard good things about the interior a bit.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Evan Hall, who's apparently won the center spot here over somebody else as they lost the center. And then I don't know where you have your numbers on Lewis, but Lewis is fine. So it's not like a gaping wound in the center of this offensive line. I think it can be okay. And I'm not super sold on hey, you add a pass rusher to this defense. You're right. I'm more excited about it because that's a more fun pick, but it's not going to fix what actually was wrong with this defense. And a lot of that was just stopping run. And honestly, I still don't think they fixed a lot of that. Wagner helps, but I kind of like having a good secondary. I like having depth at secondary. I like the Julian Love signing, especially obviously it matters if Jamal Adams isn't playing week 1, but like that's another good signing there. He's another guy who, you know what? Julian Love is a pass rusher. Like, sure. That guy can get after the
He might be better than Jamal Adams.
He's
at this stage in his career, he might be.
Honestly, we might. I mean, you're not wrong there. I thought about that a little. Like, what if he comes back and, it was like a major ligament injury for Jamal Adams. What if he comes back and he's kind of lost a step? Like, Love starting is not their worst case, and he's one that can be moved around. He can play safety. He can play in the box. He can play on the line. He can pass. He can pass rush. But Quadre Diggs is good. And then obviously the Woolen, Witherspoon, Jackson, and then the depth you have there with Kobe Bryant and Burns and whatever. Like, I'm fine building a strength in one part of that and maybe seeing if some of these pass rushers, we always talk about the link between pass rush and secondary, see if some of these pass rushers, like the Draymond Jones, who they paid, and who else they get? Who's the other addition? Jaron Reed.
The guy. Okay, so let's just go through this since we're there.
Well, and I mentioned him already. The pass rusher, both of Maya from Minnesota. If he disappointed last year, obviously, if he can take a step forward with a strong secondary, if we can get there with some of these guys, then you don't have to spend this on these pass rushers, and maybe that's the plan. I don't have it. I'm just kind of grasping at straws because I don't have the explanation for why they just keep drafting secondary pieces. Not only drafting it, but they go and sign 2 more too.
It doesn't entirely make sense to me there. So
that's my only explanation is maybe they think they have enough pieces up front, and if their coverage is at a certain level, those guys will be able to shine.
Yeah.
And
so
Bobby Wagner helps.
Let's go through the minuses, and maybe this is part of the reason that I'm like a little cool on these guys. I had a decent grade on Austin Blythe. I had a decent grade on Gabe Jackson.
He retired. Was that Blythe?
Both are out of the league. Yeah.
Okay.
Both are, I believe they're both, unless they got signed recently, but I have them both as out. So the guys they brought in, you mentioned Damian Lewis. Is that right?
Yeah, he's on billions.
Damian Lewis, I have him as a good guard. He's a good guard. Your left side of your line is solid. You're gonna hold up well on Gino's blind side. I don't like Evan Brown. I don't like Phil Haynes. Phil Haynes to me maybe should be an incomplete as opposed to having a grade on him, but I have him as a problem.
For sure the week of the 5.
Yeah, and the fact that you're center and right guard together, and combine that with anyone that you go up against that has a decent interior pass rush, I think is enough to spook me that on those days, Gino may have a longer day. Similarly, like if your interior can't run block, and we know that you're still going to have that as a major component of your offense, then I'm a little nervous. The other minuses are all on the defensive side of the ball, and like these may be controversial ratings, but I had Poona Ford as a plus player. I had Shelby Harris as a plus player. I had Al Woods as a plus player. That is some beef on your D line that is gone. Your linebacking core that is gone, Cody Barton, Bruce Evans, I thought were fine letting them walk out the door. Your safeties, Jonathan Abram and Ryan Neal that are gone, were fine letting them walk out the door. And then everybody else who's gone here was kind of just whatever piece. Except Marquise Goodwin was okay for you. I don't exactly know why you let. That would have been cheap to bring him back. But yeah, a bunch of running backs and defensive players that barely saw the field. So big deal. The bringing in Bobby Wagner, I'm excited about. The fit is obviously not a question. The familiarity is obviously not a question, and I think he does make a pretty solid impact in your run stop. Draymond Jones is a good player, but that kind of just replaces somebody you let walk. Jaron Reed is a good player, replaces somebody you let just walk.
Yeah, it's like a wash up front, right?
It's a wash, but you're only brought in 2 and you let 3 walk out the door. So you need a young guy to step up. I agree with you on Julian Love.
I think they really need a second or a good second year from. I'm sick of saying his name because I'm not ever sure and he played here in Minnesota. I've heard it a million times. Boy Mayfie. And then, there was one other younger player, Mike Morris. I think that was a draft pick this year. They have some depth up front that they drafted, but I mean they're mid-round guys, so it's like you can't just say, "Hey, this is going to work out." These guys are 4th, 5th, 6th round picks.
Yeah.
So your depth is questionable up front for sure.
And you know what? You didn't need to really use depth on Devin Bush. That was kind of a waste. Maybe that's a low cost swing, but he's redundant, and you could have used that on some more beef. So there's a little bit of team building questions swirling for me, and combine that with just less of a certainty that Gino is the same guy we saw for weeks 1 through 8 or 9. Like, when did it really go downhill for Gino? What was the week? I guess this is the Tampa Bay game.
The game in Germany, that was I think we both kind of like the spot for him there, and they really look kind of bad.
They no-showed in the first half, especially, and that would have been
showed
fine.
in Munich or Frankfurt. I'm not even sure where they were.
Yeah, the beauty of backing the Cardinals was week 6 through 9. They were backing the Seahawks. They were an amazing cover week 6 through 9. Probably should have covered week 5. Amazing cover week 4. He faded down the stretch, and the question is why. And I have not heard a theory that I find to be compelling enough to say that there's more than about a 30% chance that he is bottom half of the league quarterback this year over the balance of the season. More or less than 30.
That's fair.
Okay.
Just what we saw in the second half of the season where there were some issues. It was real spotty. It turned into, it wasn't like, he was bad the second half of the season. It was spotty. It's kind of where I'm at. And if we get spotty and this defense, the way they're building this defense still gives them like the 25th best defense, and they can't stop the run, and teams with leads are not letting them get the ball back, and Gino's spotty to begin with.
So what is his
that's why we have
distribution
some
look like?
trepidation.
What does his distribution look like then? 30% that he's 20 to 32, 50% that he is 12 to 20, and then 20% that he's a top 12.
I'm like 60% in the middle.
60% in the middle. Okay. Yeah. I think maybe that's kind of maybe where it is.
Better.
Like, it's like and it's weird because there's plenty of other quarterbacks, Andy, who we saw 1 year of flash last year. Trevor Lawrence. We've seen 1 year of good play from Trevor Lawrence. I am fine buying into him taking another step forward. We've seen 1 year of good play from Geno Smith.
You didn't know how old he was, and you'd never seen him before.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty comfortable saying Geno Smith is almost surely going to fall in the middle.
Yeah, there's a weird dynamic, and I think if we do see him play as well or better than last year, it's really going to prove out the theory that you put out of like he just never got put in a position to succeed over the first 8-9 years of his career. So, but I mean, still 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns is hard to sneeze at. So,
yeah. Okay. So I have to give them
what's your grade?
I have to give them a C-, mostly because I don't really get the team building. I don't see the puzzle that they're building. I can't see it.
I don't think you can ever have enough wide receivers and corners. And I give them a B for Bobby Wagner.
Okay. Do you think they should have moved on from Geno Smith?
They were in a real. I remember that we didn't really talk about that in the offseason. There was like, hey, are we going to get this guy a contract now because he wasn't sitting on a.
You're a year removed from thinking he was QB2 behind Drew Lock as an organization.
Yeah, they were put in kind of a weird spot with that, and I'm given what was available and what they they had the draft capital to go make a big move, but man, I was fine with it. It's the same as the Daniel Jones thing. Like, I'm fine with it. Like, just pay this guy. You have him. He knows your system. You can still try to keep making this guy better. Obviously, Daniel Jones probably has more upside based on his age, but like, I'm always fine with paying the guy instead of trying to start all over again.
Okay.
Especially kind of where they're at in their cycle. So I'm okay with it.
This is a low risk move, I felt like. The risk maybe was you didn't take your draft capital and swing on one of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft, maybe. You could have really kind of built for the future, and now you're just maybe going to put yourself in purgatory where addressing the quarterback position is not an easy answer. If this doesn't work out, if he hits that 30% where he's a 20 or 20 to 32 range this year, you kind of, I guess maybe you've lost enough that you have your own pick that you could potentially draft with your first choice this year, I guess.
Are you saying they should have moved up for one of the three?
Or just, I just had a better plan. A better plan. I don't know. Aidan O'Connell. Why not? Get Aidan O'Connell in the building.
Oh, don't even start bringing up AOC. He's a fan favorite in the Discord.
Yeah, I like AOC.
All right, real quick. I have a
Yeah.
sponsor today, and then we'll take a look at the schedule.
Oh, we have a
Today's
sponsor.
podcast. Today, yes, a brand you may have heard of. Well, today's podcast is brought to you by Ticketmaster. More memories are made when you're there for live NFL action. And when you need tickets, Ticketmaster's got you covered. As the official marketplace of the NFL, Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat. The interactive seat map gives you 360-degree previews of your section to make sure you have the best view of these pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you more flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze. You can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your team colors, which would not work for me. I do not have a team. Find your tickets today at ticketmaster.com/NFL. Yes, it's a real.
I'm Team Ticketmaster, Andy. They came through for me bigly yesterday at the U.S. Open. They got me really well. I mean, I was set up well with tickets for Arthur Ashe, best view. I knew exactly what the view I was going to have. Cal making fun of me, but like I went wide angle to give you an idea of how many people were there, and I got stung. That was literally the perfect place to be watching that match because you got to see Alcaraz move in that dimension, which was incredible.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, Ticketmaster came through for me. Our good friend who was also there, who was trying to buy tickets through a unnamed secondary market, got screwed. Ticketmaster not only had the best price for me, but just incredible seats and seamless experience. Like literally, it was like one click into the Apple Wallet. And then
I remember the first time I bought tickets, and
bang,
I don't know
bang,
what it
bang.
was, but the first time I had tickets on like my phone, I'm like, oh, like we're moving on.
They came through for me. I mean, honestly, I'm a convert. Like there's no reason to try to scramble for secondary market otherwise. Honestly, it's because the other ones, they all kind of have like weird issues, weird hangups. And if you're in a crunch, if you're at the U.S. Open and you want tickets for Ashe, right? Fire away.
Get me undies.
Yeah.
Let's moving from tennis back to football. Let's take a look at who they play this year. Lots of discussion about this week one game already in the Discord. I know some people that are very much in line with all the unknowns that we laid out, and I think Sam she's just laying it with the money line on the Rams, saying, "Hey, there's a lot of unknowns. Might as well take the unknowns with the bigger price." But look at those bright colors. They have a really nasty one, the second game with the Rams, where I'm guessing the Rams are coming off their bye. And look at all that green, though, the significant travel advantage.
Almost every game is an advantage or disadvantage travel.
So, yeah,
crazy.
That's what you end up on a coast, but they do end up playing a bunch of teams off back-to-back road games. I mean, this happens to all these West Coast teams here and there, where it's like, hey, you're catching this team off a back-to-back, and they have to fly out to the West Coast. Like 2 straight road games. One of them's a nasty travel spot. Obviously, Philly, that's a long way from basically the coast. Even just like Pittsburgh having to come to town, that's a decent travel spot. Washington, Cleveland, all these Eastern time zone teams having to come out to Seattle. You do have a nice little home field advantage out here compared to average in the league. And yeah, the only part about, we're talking about all these advantage spots. Obviously, there's the travel disadvantage spots of going to Baltimore on the East Coast, going at Tennessee, playing an early game in a spot like that, and then just the nastiness that is the middle here. This is a rainbow. It starts low at both ends and jacks itself up in the middle because there's just Niners, Dallas, Niners, Philly. What? Like, I mean, even just like from Cleveland to Philly. So Cleveland, Baltimore. I mean, maybe Washington has their shit figured out by then. And yes, the Rams might not be very good, but San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, Philly. That is a brutal stretch. I guess you're really going to find out if this team has shit figured out.
So, Andy, this schedule screams 500 to me. And I know there's 17 games, so you can't really go 500. But
the team has done it though.
I feel like you can fight. They're gonna find a way to go 8-1. I feel like they're gonna
pick the tie. I want you to pick the tie, just because that's such a dumb question.
I'm gonna have it hosting Philadelphia week 15.
I don't hate that.
I think that's a pretty evenly matched game, actually. Philadelphia, they're at the tail end of just a heinous stretch heading into that Seattle game. That is a awful
the Giants
spot for
do love to tie.
Giants do love to tie. I mean, I'll be perfectly frank. There are very rare instances where I will look at the situational stuff with rest and travel and X factors. And just that's enough for me to kind of decide one way or the other. But this is like almost perfect. Buy, sell, buy, sell, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. Like it's almost perfect setup of if you just stick to situations here, you're going to probably catch value betting the Seahawks on or against almost every.
We're treating this like Pacers, Blazers, best of 7.
This, yeah.
I don't know why I picked those two teams. They'd have to meet in the finals.
They would have to be in the finals. No, this is more like I'm trying to think of what the best zigzag series was in the NBA playoffs last year. I think it was.
I just named two teams. Like
the best zigzag was probably like Boston, Philly, maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, and I know it's all relative to the market, but boy, there's a decent chance that the market doesn't adjust enough off some of these easy stretches / hard stretches. Like there's a decent chance to kind of catch them in a few different spots here. I think you're right. I think it's a really nice team where the market is maybe slow or too fast in a bunch of spots based on the advantages, the disadvantages, and the teams they played.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like if you look really good against Arizona because they don't have a quarterback. It's Clayton Tune throwing to James Conner 14 times. And then you go up against, a Cleveland team with a really good offensive line that, has a wide receiver one and obviously a pass rush that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how good your center is. Doesn't matter if you have two young good tackles. Like a pass rush is going to get after you. So there's some weird back-to-backs in the schedule. It's a goofy schedule all in all.
Honestly, like week 1 to week 11, this team is winning, covering, losing, not covering, winning, covering, losing, not covering, losing, winning, losing, winning, losing. And so they're going to be right at 500 when they go into that Thursday double up. The first Thursday, by the way, is Thanksgiving. 11/23 this year is Thanksgiving. Make plans to go see your folks. The Seattle Seahawks, I do not believe will be 1.5 within a field goal of the Niners at that point, but maybe they will. That stretch is heinous. San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, Philly. I would be surprised if they get more than one win in that stretch, which means a 500 team that loses 4 in a row, people are pretty much going to write them off for the playoffs. But then the finish with the Tennessee game and an Arizona game in there, they could conceivably squeeze out the 7th seed in the wild card spot again this year. So I think,
Yeah, the only advantage, for this team late in the season is a couple of nice, even though they're road games, a couple of road games against some teams that might be eliminated. You still got to get it done against Pittsburgh, and they're in a bad travel spot, obviously. But you might need to go 3-0. And it's funny too. The most fun game from last year, the track meet with Detroit, like that ended up being
really good.
That ended up being the game that decided who goes to the playoffs. They both finished with the same record. The head-to-head went to Seattle in a 48-45 game with like 12 touchdowns. So,
yeah.
I think it might be another situation like that where Seattle is in the mix, but the last 3 games kind of decide if they are the 7th seed or sitting at home.
So, yeah. And I think, honestly, 8-1 is where I'm stuck here. That feels like could be enough to get a 7th seed in a shitty NFC. But even more than that, like, are they alive to win the NFC West is the key question. Because success for this team this year should be, win your division. And I think they match up very poorly against San Francisco for a lot of reasons. I struggle to see how they hang in either of those two games, and the fact that they're clustered with Dallas and Philly and all that, like that looks like trouble.
Purdy would have to be so bad, so like giving games away bad. Like, oh my God, he's a liability, and we should start McCaffrey at Wildcat for that team to, we'll get to that team, but like it just really does seem like there's a gap that exists with the levels of the rosters. And yes, injuries can happen, but it's tough to put together like non-cluster injury situations where not only could they, because I feel like part of winning the division is probably at least winning one against the Niners. And you're right, just the matchups are so bad. We'll get into the Niners heavier when we get to the next spot, but like their defense is kind of I don't know. They've struggled a little with some of the deep stuff that Seattle always seems to get like a deep ball on them, but they've addressed a few things there too.
Yeah, last year in 3 games against the San Francisco 49ers, the Seahawks were 0-3 against the spread, and it'll shock you not at all to know they were dogs in 0-3, all 3. So not only could they not win those games, they could not stay within the point spread in any of those games.
Betting odds?
Yeah, not an easy schedule, really, and I think that's what kind of throws the final. That's kind of the final ingredient. Sprinkle a little pessimism on this team.
It's middle of the pack because there are some very winnable games, but that stretch is so nasty through the middle. 35-1 to win the Super Bowl is not very interesting to me.
No, I don't think realistically, because in my opinion, you're such an outsider for your own division. That means you're talking about going on the road, and even again in a weak NFC, I don't think you're not winning road games, in my opinion, against the top of this conference.
No,
you may not win road games against the likes of the Lions.
If you want to make the Super Bowl, the odds of you needing to probably win 5 road games in 6 weeks is pretty high. Based on the end of the season into the playoffs, and then they don't. I know it's road games against the Cardinals and Titans. They get precipitously harder after that when you make it into the playoffs.
Yep, easy to put a line through them for outrights here, in my opinion. Make the playoffs. Yes, -122 is starting to look a little sketchy to me. Not interested in a no +100, but I think the right plan, Andy, is going to be, if they luck box their way to a couple of wins that should be losses in the first 11 weeks of the season, and they are sitting healthily above 500, this is like a bombs away fade team, I think, in terms of make the playoffs market. Because if you're getting like a biggish price on no there, if it's 3-1-ish, if the Seahawks are 7-4 or 8-3 even, I would, you might see a big number.
And there's an opposite way to approach that too. If there's another NFC team that has a softer ending to their schedule that you like to pass them, that maybe that number is a little bigger. Maybe there's a couple teams you like. You can go both ways with that as well. But I agree with you there. Yeah. Although, I do think make the playoffs, that number gets longer over the first few or shorter, over the first few weeks, because they probably do start the season some success. Yeah. So I'm not making it like an advocate of taking that and taking the other side in a few weeks, but it's just
and James and Patrick are pointing out some good things. This was a team that did take some early money, and I got that 100% in March and April when you were looking at how bad the roster of the Rams was shaping up, and that the Cardinals were going to try to lose, and that the Niners had a absolute mystery box at quarterback. This was the easy team to take some swings on. Easy call.
They're big numbers.
Big numbers, awesome draft capital, bunch of young players, retain the quarterback. Let's take the big numbers. Now at these prices, very, very cold on them. Market has gone past what would be fair, I think, in a lot of respects. And this is now a team that I'm excited to sell at the right price. dream outcome for me to start the season, Andy, is, and it's sorry to Sam, who I know likes the Rams week 1. Dream outcome for me is the Seahawks just absolutely throttle the Rams defense and score 30-something points. And then the Lions get, taken to the cleaners as the sacrificial lambs against the Chiefs. And then that week 2 game opens up with like a pick-em-ish price, because I'm going to probably be betting the Lions week 2 at almost any price.
Charles S., any award potential? JSN is like 20-1 to win, and
very cool on that.
Rookie of the year. It's going to be tough to get the kind of numbers as the third guy, as the slot guy, with those 2 receivers and with their, how much they're going to want to run the ball. I don't know that he can get the numbers. He can. There's a universe where he gets 1,000-yard season with 8 touchdowns, but he's also gonna probably miss some time. Like, that number isn't gonna get shorter. He was at practice wearing a hard cast on his hand. That's what he uses to catch the ball. Like,
oh, really?
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, he broke some weird little bone in his hand or wrist or something. So I think if that number's like 50 or 60 in a few weeks because he misses a couple weeks, like he has the opportunity to do well in this offense. I don't think they have a viable candidate for defensive player of the year. It's we discussed that a little in the Discord. That's one of those weird awards where it's like, hey, you're really good at defense. Do it like one more year, and then we'll give you that award the year after that.
That award is so phenomenally top heavy this year.
Or don't lock yourself into like 12 interceptions. Then hey, guess what? You're also in the discussion because wow, that's crazy. That's a lot of interceptions. But offensive rookie of the year, maybe at a bigger number for JSN, maybe at a big number for Charbonnet if things hash out. If those numbers just aren't any good right now. And then, MVP would be a really tough ask for Gino. That's basically your only candidates, and that's rough.
Yeah, the hard pass on any
pass on awards for the most part. But yeah, by range of outcomes is 5 to 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I think they're gonna finish somewhere between 7 wins and 9 wins.
Yeah, the 5 is the hey, Gino isn't good, and that's a problem kind of thing. But yeah, 7, 8, 9 is.
I will sincerely be surprised if they win fewer than 7. There's a lot of really good spots on their schedule. And there's 4 games against the Rams and the Cardinals. I don't know if you count those, but I think those will be 4 wins. Yeah, they're going to get to 7. The question is, can they get more than 9? And I don't necessarily see a path. I don't. It's going to take another step forward for Gino. I don't even think if Gino replicates his numbers from last year in a 17-game season, I don't think it's going to be enough considering some of the tough games.
If Mike Tomlin can win Coach of the Year, why not Pete? I didn't think of that because I made a case for Pete last year, and he was not in the conversation. He's another weird one where it's like he's just part of the furniture. He just exists in the NFL infrastructure. They made the thing is
he's got to win the West.
Huge, he has to win the division. They'd have to not only that, but they won a bunch of games and made the playoffs last year. They'd probably have to win like 13 and win the West, and he would have to get a lot of credit for like all the rookies playing well. I guess what's the biggest thing to get Pete credit is like, oh my God, the draft they had the last 2 years. It's like they have like 6 Pro Bowlers who are in their first and second year. Like Pete really orchestrated this second wave of Seattle.
For him,
my God, the Legion of Boom is back.
That's you just said it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the only narrative that gets him in the discussion. And realistically, as the second choice in a bad division already, he's got a real narrow path.
Yeah, maybe 14 wins.
Like the narrative for Tom, the narrative for Tomlin, and he's the 4th choice in a very, very good division.
Yeah, the words better than Sherman have to be uttered on like first take. I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough path. So
it's gonna be tough.
betting. I think you kind of laid out a nice betting plan already, but just really monitoring market sentiment and taking advantage of these back and forth ping pong spots.
I need to start set up a couple of alerts for Seahawks news because I feel like I'm going to be betting these guys every single week.
I always forget to turn Google alerts off, and I have some on from the fucking track meets in Budapest.
That was great meet.
Oh, it was good.
It was really good. Hey, give me your sincere take on week 1 because I appreciate Sam's point of view on this, obviously, and there's other sharp people that are playing Rams. I don't think this is entirely a JSN is unavailable fade. There is just general belief that the Rams are going to be competitive in this game, and I am struggling to figure out if there's
any spot where the Rams are competitive. Obviously, it's early on. Kupp is a legitimate, offensive player of the year, 2,000-yard kind of guy if they use him in the same way and he's healthy all year. Like, you have at least one really good player on offense, and you have a smart coach. And I get it. So I don't think Sam was very interested in taking the spread, basically, and he can explain it. He's sitting in the chat too. He said, there's a lot of unknowns on both these teams, and we're always surprised by teams every year. And if you're saying these teams are that far apart, just give me the money line on this one.
Yeah, Dan, the underdog conference this year is probably the AFC North. That's the one where the margins are so narrow. If you're getting points in that conference, you probably just take them.
He did take the points.
I'm not
too.
betting the Browns week
Coward.
1. Though. I'm not betting the Browns week 1 because we're going to get Joe Burrow's good to go news soon.
We did today. I mean, he looks good. He looks fine.
Okay. All right. So we regret to inform you he is perfectly operational. Okay. There's a lot of questions I have about this Rams defense. It's so soft. I feel like the Seahawks might just be able to run. I don't want to overreact to the preseason, Andy. This team was giving up 40 points to nobodies. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, if you think
might be all time fucking terrible.
The Rams, so we can tell you one thing. The depth pieces on the Rams defense are very bad.
They are very bad.
It's hard to give up 40 points in the preseason. People did that. Wasn't even starters, man.
They gave up 31, 31, and 41, didn't they? Wasn't that it?
It was not good. And I know every team treats the preseason differently, but yeah, let me pull up my Rams.
I mean, it was, you know what? It was against the mighty Denver Broncos. So
they went 1 for 10 on third down in that game.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Broncos, you know how many Broncos first downs there were? 33. How is that even possible?
My notes on, and nobody played starters because they did joint practice for a couple days, but my notes were Rams for 1 for 10 on third down, looked ready to finish just ahead of Arizona. Stetson Bennett got 3 drives, Rippon got 4, and something called Dresser Win cleaned up. Dresser Win.
That's the offense, man. This defense conceded 500 yards.
Yeah.
2 backups.
Yeah, no, it was, and the converse notes on the other side of the game was the same joint practice, but Stidham first half, Ben DiNucci second half. He's not even on the team anymore. Rams backup defense is very bad.
Yeah.
Marvin Mims got some action.
Okay. No, this Rams defense. I mean, we'll see. I'm at the point where I got to put my money where my mouth is on this, and I'm just gonna have to lay it with the Seahawks. I think.
All right, we got next Wednesday. Save it for Wednesday, or bet it now. I don't care.
Yeah.
All right, should we call it?
Yep.
131 down. Baskin Robbins.
Lego. Welcome to the deep dive. Probably could have done 2 hours on the Niners. You could fill
that was
infinity. You could fill infinity hours talking about this team and the arc that they have taken to get here and where they go from here, the mistakes that were made, the unbelievable successes they've had coming from random developmental pieces here and here and here. Like, this is the most interesting team to talk about in the NFL. Sorry, it's not the Jets, it's the Niners. And I was very resistant to believe that they were as good as they were all year last year, and I own that. I did not bet against them as often as it would have seemed, considering I just had general pessimism, mostly because I was kind of hopeful that I would get a huge ass Seahawks ticket for the West home.
Oh yeah, no, I think you were anchored to that.
I was anchored.
It was a beautiful bet by you, but no,
yeah.
If you go back and really look, and this is probably sacrilege because you can't weight defense anywhere near how you weight offense ever, much less in today's NFL. But if you look at the metrics on both sides of the ball, up and down, and look at different ways of ranking and rating and, evaluating teams, might have been the best team in the football league last year. They were very, very good, and it's crazy how they were 3-4 at one point. So this is a wild stat too. They were 3-4, but they were also the first team to clinch their division.
That is freaking crazy.
Well, I mean they won their last 12 or 10 games in a row.
Take it a step further, man. What were their losses in their 3-4?
God. So that's the thing too. The disgusting, ugly loss in the first week in the monsoon to the Bears. The Bears would only win 2 more games that year. They had a terribly ugly one in Denver. Obviously, Denver would not go on to win a lot of games last year.
Insane scoreline, 11-10.
It was 11-10. Yes, the ugly one in Kansas City, in Atlanta, which was almost 100% predicated on turnovers. They lost the turnover battle 3-0. One of those turnovers was a fumble recovery that was basically in the end zone, if I remember right. Mariota threw for like 120 yards in that game. Like, that was kind of in the part of the year where it's like, oh my God, this guy's not even good. We need Ritter at this point. They didn't do a whole lot except, just, hey, if you're going to turn the ball over 3 times and we take care of it and run the ball, we're going to win this. They won that by 2 touchdowns. Obviously, you can cut them some slack for the Kansas City loss. People do lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, but the other 3 games that they lost were just horribly ugly affairs. And after that Kansas City game, they were sitting there at 3-4. They would not lose a game again where they had a quarterback with a working arm on the roster.
Yeah, Andy, do you know what the common thread between those 3 teams they lost to, with the Bears, Broncos, and Falcons? They all finished with top 8 picks. The Broncos didn't make their pick because they sent it to Seattle, but these were bad teams, and they lost to them early in the season. Very confounding. Like, if you replay the season a dozen times,
I looked at those box scores. It's just wild.
And this is like the insane thing. The plan last year to start the season was, all right, we're competing for a Super Bowl, and we're going to do it with Trey Lance.
Jimmy is in a different field practicing by himself, so he's not a distraction.
No one will offer us a bag of balls for Jimmy Garoppolo. We can't cut him in good conscience, so we're going to keep him around and see if he gets healthy. Oh, by the way, Jimmy Garoppolo, week 2, you're in, and you're the guy.
What was the Lance injury? It was ankle?
Broken ankle?
Ankle was fucked up.
Broken ankle? Badly sprained ankle? I don't know 100%.
I think it was broken. Yeah, week 2, Seattle out. Garoppolo put up good numbers. Garoppolo looked good in the system, obviously. I mean, you guys watched the games too. And then week 13?
Yep. Trey Lance started the first 2 games. Jimmy Garoppolo started the next 10. And then it was Josh Johnson. Then it was Brock Purdy time, baby. Brock Purdy time. Throughout the season, the roster went through some other turnover that's worth noting. Like they
Yeah,
added Christian McCaffrey.
They did acquire, and looking at the contracts now that we're getting for these running backs, like it was essentially the Jonathan Taylor thing where you had to trade assets and then still pay him, and they paid him $12 million, which in hindsight it's like, yeah, but he also like I charted there. I just went through. I didn't chart this. That's a fucking bad word to use for it. I went on PFF and counted, added up 3 or 4 numbers. And it's like, man, he lined up outside or in the slot or as a a tight end or a receiver on the end of the line a lot. You're getting a lot for what you paid for a running back at that point, and he just fits this. He fits the system and what they do and what they're good at so well. And, everyone, the big story obviously was Brock Purdy and how well he played, and Shanny and how he doesn't need a quarterback to succeed. But man, what a expensive, but just a perfect piece to add to this offense. And it was and honestly, Debo didn't have that great of a year.
No, he
CMC
was off.
took a big,
off year.
CMC was massive in 11 games for the Niners, 1,200 yards from scrimmage, 10 touchdowns.
The good for them that mattered is that Kittle had a healthy campaign. Kittle was broadly available.
He was a lot better in the red zone as well. He scored like 10 touchdowns. That was kind of a bugaboo for him. He wasn't scoring.
Yep. Ayuk took a step forward as a player. He's starting to realize on his draft capital. There were some head scratching moments where like Trent Williams missed some time, and I remember being like, well, there goes that. Trent Williams, he's the only guy with a damn pulse on that offensive line. Good luck protecting Jimmy G. Now, it didn't matter. They schemed around it.
That's the thing, and I'll let you finish because I got a weird one to go into after that with Trent Williams.
The only thing I was going to add was the game that Trent Williams got hurt, I believe, was the Broncos game, Andy, and that had one of the silliest plays of the season where Jimmy Garoppolo stepped out of bounds, conceding a safety in the end zone, and then threw a pick six. And because the pick six gets wiped off the board because of the safety happens first, it doesn't turn into like the Orlovsky running out of the back of the end zone safety.
I was like, oh, that was good.
That was actually a good safety. So we can't make fun of it, actually.
And Orlovsky did take a victory lap, and God bless me to have it.
That was quite silly. But like that was that was part of just the tapestry of absurdity that was Broncos primetime, as much as it was a silly Niners game.
There was so much Broncos we were fucking forced to watch.
Yeah. So here's real quick though, the point I was going to make though about the wins and losses, and I think you nailed it in terms of just. These are kind of inexcusable losses. There's a world where you replay last year's season for the Niners, Trey Lance doesn't get hurt, and they finish like 5-12 because it turns out he wasn't ready. There's a world where they don't drop these games to lesser teams, and they finish like 16-1. And they're the 1 seed with the bullet, and then the NFC Championship games in San Francisco, not Philly. Right?
Gene.
But I think the story really of their season was Brock Purdy. They went undefeated with him as a starter, and he was Mr. Irrelevant. This is literally, you are rewriting the second coming of Tom Brady, but even more ridiculous.
That was one of the biggest knocks on them. Like, and it still is this year, but it's like, hey, they didn't have draft picks. They didn't have a first rounder. Miami had it because of the Trey Lance thing. And essentially it's like, I think their first pick was like a second or third round defensive end who's his name is eluding me right now. I think Drake Jackson in the second, but it didn't matter how many picks they had. They drafted a quarterback who's viable as a starter late in the draft. And it's there's a lot of, as many articles has been written about Geno Smith and his, possible fall back to earth. Obviously, we've had just as many about Purdy and interceptable balls and this and that. With Shanahan, with a full offseason to think about how to use this offense and what we saw, like this is the 5th season in a row they've led the league in yards after catch. Like, lead the league in anything positive for 5 years in a row. You've done something good, but something like that where that's such a big part of, I mean, it's obviously the skill of the players, but the scheme, knowing that you have those guys that are constantly just getting extra yards out in space. You know what they averaged on, it was passes that were caught at or behind the line of scrimmage. They averaged 10 yards after catch, which wasn't even first in the league. I think it was tied for second, but just everything they did, everything they did kind of plays into we could take it even easier we could ask even less of Brock Purdy and probably still be pretty good based on what we have for skill positions here. The weirdest thing I did in my Niners research, and I ran across this a couple weeks ago, but I dug in deeper this afternoon when I had some time, was there was an article, and it was one of the fan sites, and it was like a grading of the 2022 season. He seemed angry, this guy. He was really down on, like maybe if this team could protect their quarterbacks, they would have won the game against Philly, because they had 3. It turns out, they actually had like the 5th best pass protection grade. On the other hand, they did try to chip block Hassan Reddick with like a 3rd string tight end, and it didn't work out. But not such is life. But deeper into that play, there's like multiple articles, and I've forgotten this because someone mentioned it last year about Trent Williams tipping plays based on how he lines up. Like he'll line up. That. Yeah, it's like, it's a play action run, or it's a play
based
action
on how
pass.
His feet were set.
Yeah, it's a play action pass, and it's a pass, but it's disguised as a run, and he'll set up like he does on passes, and the other teams know this. They've even asked him. He was interviewed about this, and he's like, well, that's dumb. He's like, I do that. I know I do that. I don't care, because we have like 30 different runs, and there's 6 different ways we can take that ball each time. He's like, and maybe sometimes I wanted to think that or something. It was a weird exchange, and I don't know. It's like a whole thing. He's so good, but they said on that play, he supposedly tipped it was a pass, and Reddick got off even faster on that chip block. So like once you get too deep into the fan sites and the conspiracy theories, things get weird. But it's safe to say I'd still rather have Trent Williams on my team than not.
Yeah, he's a future Hall of Famer in my opinion.
Yeah, if he makes an All-Pro team, it like ties him with like Munoz and and like some of these real great tackles of all time.
First ballot guys. God, man, a million ways to go, man. Like my thoughts are so disorganized about this team specifically. Let's start with Shanahan though, because I think that's really where it all ought to start.
Something I didn't mention too in Seattle, and if you're listening to both of them in the right order, Seattle didn't lose any coordinators. It lost some guys lower down in Asai and the one other fellow that went on to be an OC somewhere. But like, it's another year of losing a D coordinator.
Casali in Tampa.
Casales, yeah, he went to Tampa Bay to be the OC, but you did lose. And I'll touch on this a little more later because I don't know if it's as huge of a deal, but losing DeMeco Ryans isn't ideal. It's not ideal.
Probably not good.
It can't be great to keep losing coordinators every 5 years.
I agree with that. But the entire discussion about the Niners, I think, revolves around Kyle Shanahan. Presumably by now you've had an opportunity to go through the Play Callers series. It's illuminating, particularly about Shanahan and some of like what makes him tick. Beyond just giving you an outstanding fantasy team name with the Piss Boys, his kind of just psycho mentality about football is genuine. His philosophy is very straightforward: create space, dictate where the space will be by the way that the schematic nature of your play call. And it sounds simple, but he has been able to exercise and execute this to a degree that no one else in those rooms has been able to do. There is a repeatable nature to this. that is borne out in the lifetime statistical profile of Mr. James Garoppolo. He stands out as a top 6 all-time QB in EPA per play. And I think you would give people a 30 names in the last 20 years of quarterbacks that they would rather have over Jimmy G, but there he is right there at the top. And that is almost entirely in my mind because of Shanahan and because of the way Shanahan schemes offense. And the yak is kind of the obvious statistical number you can point to as, well, you don't get that by accident. You get that because of careful thought and execution and all that. And it is easy to look at it's easy to be superlative and look at a player like Mahomes and be like, there's no way to defend him now. And I think that's probably true. It's easy to also look at Shanahan and be like, there's no way to defend this. Not if he has these guys. Not if he's got, not if he's got McCaffrey and Samuel and Kittle and Ayuk and, Trent Williams. He's got, multiple, future Hall of Famers running a scheme that is kind of not unstoppable, but just like there's no amount of prep you can do in a week preparing for the Niners that's going to give you a schematic advantage against him. You are always going to be at a disadvantage defensively. You just have to cross your fingers that your athletes have someone up because you got home field against them in the NFC Championship game. And you have a couple of tips, like you mentioned, a couple of tip-offs to help you get a teeny little, give us something back in terms of an advantage. I would say that the other thing that was pretty apparent from the play callers, or at least what the immediate thing that it made me think about, was like, this guy. I'm not a what do you call it? A religious person at all. I don't know if you know that, but I'm not.
Religious. I think you just say religious person.
I'm not a religious person.
Zealot has like negative connotations.
I'm also not like superstitious person really, but it does feel like Shanahan made some deal with the devil where he was like, I will unlock offense for you. Or maybe it's a monkey paw. We got a monkey paw situation on our hands. He was like, yeah, he wished for, I want to unlock offense. I want to be the master of offense. And the but we're going to take away your quarterback for health reasons every single year. like this is
you're not allowed to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, right. You can have offense unlocked, but we're going to make you conservative at all the wrong moments, and we're going to take away your healthy quarterback. And because like the quarterback health thing at this point is truly insane. The number of years that they have lost QB1, QB2, and in the case of last year, QB3 is absolutely ridiculous. Like it's not a schematic thing. I don't think that these guys are getting hurt. I don't even think it's a health, I don't think it's part of your training room this is happening. I don't think it's you're misevaluating players and you're getting fragile dudes. I mean, yeah, Jimmy G was a fragile dude, I guess. But otherwise, like, it's not obvious to me that there's something going wrong in your process where your quarterbacks keep getting hurt. It feels a little superstitious. It's weird. And I don't entirely think that what we saw between Shanahan and Purdy last year in terms of synergy is like really worth doubting. Does that make sense?
If they're gonna do something on offense, it doesn't matter who they do it with. I'm not one to doubt it, because I mean, and it's a two-part. Like I said, not only do you have Shanahan and what they've put together for a scheme and a good left tackle, and just like not only like, hey, wide receiver and running back and tight end, and guess what? They can all kind of move around and they're interchangeable. This positionless football, but like if you take that scheme and those guys, and then they're also so good in space. Like that's just the yards after catches. it's not like it's underrated. People very much value that, but how they're able to just take all this short stuff and turn it into stuff constantly is how you move chains. How you move chains is how you keep drives alive. You scoring wins games. Like they have kind of unlocked offense a little bit here with just putting these people together with this coach, and it is crazy what it took to take this team down. And it was like, oh, you don't have anyone left on this team who can throw a fucking pass. Like that was such a weird. It was like a sad ending. And
yeah, of course.
I know I had a. I don't remember what the price was, but they wouldn't let me bet much on it anyway, so it wasn't the end of the world if this went down in flames. But I had bet Eagles to lose to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl before like maybe the divisional round or maybe even just the Final Four. And so I was like, oh, well, good. Like at least that's one step closer. But it was kind of a downer that the game basically was over. Like whatever the win percentage probability was too low unless it was triple digits at that point. Like they essentially had to go to Wildcat or whatever. And it was, I mean, they tried to bring Purdy out, didn't they? It's like, oh, he he can't do it.
Yeah, he was basically using his offhand. Yeah, it was sad the way the season ended. But again, like I think the Eagles were the right side in that game. I think home field advantage mattered a ton. The extra rest the Eagles got mattered a ton, and getting the 1 seed mattered ultimately. So San Francisco, to their own detriment, losing those games early in the season to those bad teams.
Yeah.
It bit them in the ass. If that game's in your house and you have extra time to get right, you're in better shape to win that game. So the question was Purdy a fluke, or is he kind of the absolute ideal avatar for what Shanahan wants to do? Because
if you make me bet one way or the other, I'm pro Purdy. I'm pro Niners.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's enough evidence to just be like, oh, hey, here's all these things that Purdy did wrong last year, though. Well, guess what, beat writer for the Rams or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but if you know this, Kyle Shanahan knows this.
Sure.
He might not be able to make good in-game adjustments and the right decisions when it comes to fourth down, but he certainly has plenty of time and knows these things occurred too. And he has a lot. Like they certainly weren't grooming Purdy to start in camp and in preseason last year. And granted, yes, we had a similar situation where he was unable to due to a lot of the the elbow recovery. He still didn't get a full camp or a preseason like you would normally as a starter, but just that the preparation with the playbook, the preparation with the scheming and what they've worked on in the offseason, there's a chance he's better. It's just like, oh, guess what? He's a very, very reliable quarterback, especially in the system, and this team just went. Somebody brought him up, and I know the knock is like they won too many games last year, and the schedule isn't all that great for the Niners. There's some weird spots for them, but I did bet Shanahan at like 33-1 to win Coach of the Year. Just like he shouldn't be at the bottom of this list because their ceiling is like 17 wins.
Yeah, sure.
There's a scenario where they just win all their games because this offense takes another step forward. And I mean, it's going to take like 14 because they won a lot of games last year.
Yeah, they will. So here's my general thesis about Purdy and Shaney. Into the offseason with a quarterback who needed UCL or whatever he needed. I don't care what the actual specific.
Yeah, you're right.
He needed to go under. He needed to go under the knife for an elbow. And this is, by the way, the knock on Purdy and the reason he slid to Mr. Irrelevant was because he has an absolute noodle of an arm, or at least he did in the draft process. Maybe it's getting stronger. Something in the water up in the Bay Area. So there's something up there in the Bay Area that
Balco dumped all their barrels in the Bay before they left.
Yeah, the Bay Area has incredible laboratory companies that tend to have supplements that really help. Zinc. I don't know if you've seen. Have you seen the Balco Netflix show? They're giving them all the zinc, Andy. That I'd love to break that down someday. That freaking Victor Conte, man, Jesus Christ, that guy.
We should do a movie review pod, but only
happily do that. I got all the time in the world.
We just need like an extra day. They need to add an 8th day.
But no, the Purdy's knock was arm strength, but his pluses are, he's excellent pocket awareness, good mobility, fast decision making, and he's, if Kyle Shanahan as the coach of this team and the offensive mind of this team is effectively playing a video game out there, it was almost like he finally found the player of the choices that fit his skill set perfectly, or what he wanted most in a player was what Brock Purdy brought to the table, and it was like hand in glove, bang. Like, this is now exactly what I've always wanted in terms of a person doing this, performing this role. And even though he needed surgery, it was almost like they kind of went into the offseason with like, oh yeah, Purdy he's QB1. Like, there's no quarterback competition here.
Yeah, they really wanted to write articles about that, but it turned out like, oh no, they kind of
they were sure. He was sure.
Yeah,
Shanahan was sure. He's like, yeah, if it takes him half a year to get back to healthy, of course, he's QB1. Like, that was the mentality you got after a couple of weeks of this. And I don't know, man. It's a wild bet to make, to go with a quarterback who's recovering from this injury and just be that sure. But Shanahan is a guy that I'm not doubting. I'm not doubting that he has figured out that he's the right player to execute this system at all. And with how good the scheme is and how good the weapons are, it probably doesn't matter. Like, that's ultimately it. Like, I was perfectly fine, and I wasted the American dollars betting Sam Darnold comeback player of the year, thinking that Purdy was going to take till November to get to full strength. And maybe at that point, Sam Darnold was performing too well to take him off the field. I don't think that was even ever a realistic possibility now. I think Purdy was always going to come in whenever he was ready. And it just so happened he recovered, he was grinding enough to get ready to play week 1. And here we go. And it feels sketchy. It feels like he's one hit away. It feels like TJ Watt could end his season in one quarter. But it's what Kyle wants, and I'm done doubting it. And I think realistically, as long as they have a healthy set of skill position players, as long as Trent Williams is out there, and as long as the defense is, full of Hall of Famers, then this team is going to win double-digit games and ought to be power rated as the best in the NFC, specifically because they don't have Dallas or Philly in their division. Dallas and Philly are a coin flip away from being on the road the entire playoffs. The Niners are a coin flip away of being the 1 seed, in my opinion. And that to me means they ought to have the most equity in the NFC. And this is independent of what's going on with Purdy and his health. This is independent of losing coordinators. This is independent of, basically any other kind of external factor. I still think the talent on this roster is enough to make them the clear favorites.
Yeah. Little off-season talk. Like we said, it's again, hey, we don't have draft picks, guys. Not only did we do the Trey Lance thing, but we did the CMC thing. And honestly, if you look at it all from a 10,000-foot view, like, fuck it, whatever. You're still set up. It'd be cool to have some draft picks, but they don't really have draft picks. And that's just kind of where we're at. Like,
they've been wasting They've been wasting draft picks on worse things than nothing worse than Trey Lance, I guess, but they've been wasting draft picks on other bad players.
Yeah, I mean, at least they just said, all right, we're going to cut bait. Losing McGlinchey isn't great. I dug into Colton McKivitz a little. I'm not super excited about that exchange. Losing Jimmy Ward, not great. But the Javon Hargrave signing, I guess, is a big plus. I like that up front. Obviously, you have, I don't know, where do you rank their linebackers? Number one?
Number one.
Tops? Yeah, it's just number one pretty easily. And then
number one, and there's gap.
With a bullet, yeah. So, like I said, they did give up some deep balls, and there was some sketchiness sometimes in the secondary. And that's where I like that they got Wilkes when they had to replace another defensive coordinator. He is a defensive backfield coach. Like, that's where he cut his chops. Like, he's been doing. He was the defensive backs coach for the Bears when Peanut Tillman was forcing 4 or 5 fumbles every year and then picking off another half dozen balls. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's been with some good defensive secondaries. He is a D-backs coach. So I think, and that's kind of what they said. Like when they brought him in, I read some interviews with Shanny. He said like, hey, obviously, we got linebacker figured out. Obviously, we have Bosa, we get Hargrave. Like, just fix the secondary and go from there, kind of stuff. So if they do take a big step forward because of him, the rest of the defense is already very rock solid. I don't know. I can't stop saying nice things about the Niners, I guess. So naturally, they win like 3 games here. The Lance trade, obviously, they didn't get anything back hardly, but it's fine. Cut your bait. It's a sunk cost at that point. Whatever.
Yeah. What is
and Mosley too? Losing Mosley. I don't know how you have that rated.
Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Let's go through the transactions since we're there. McGlinchey is a loss. That's a minus. Ebicom minus. Wilson minus. Ward minus. That's it. Everybody else who walked out the door was either neutral or a little below minus. Even Mosley, like I guess he only played 29% of snaps last year. That's maybe why my rating is low on him. The guys you added, Javon Hargrave, huge plus. And then everybody else was depth, basically. I don't think any of these other guys are really going to threaten for starting time. If Cleveland Farrell pops, I mean, it's going to be crazy, but it would be par for the course.
It would be
par for the course.
Oh man, that's looked at like such a bad pick in that stretch of Raiders picks.
Yeah, but relatively little turnover here. Like the big offseason move that I think we need to spend a little bit of time on was Trey Lance. And what do you think about? Do you have an opinion? Do you have a take, or was this just bad process?
One time, I took a job in Wisconsin. And it turned out I was being tragically paid very early in my career, to the tune of like, oh, do you want a 200% raise and better benefits? Like, come out to Wisconsin. I was unmarried, young, so I'll take this job. And it turned out that town had a even lower cost of living. So for a little bit, I was a young man who was making, twice as much money as I had made the week before. So I bought a 1980 Chevy C10 truck with the big flare sides and 40-inch super swamper tires. It was essentially a monster truck. I saw it on the side of the road for like $6,000, and this thing was just beautiful red. It was just huge. I'll show you a picture sometime. I drove that truck like 4 times. Like it was such a bad idea. I don't know if I was drunk or high or what, but I bought eventually my future wife moved in with me. She eventually took a job out in Wisconsin as well. And she called it super truck. She fucking hated it. Oh my God. It was a cool truck. I took a bath. Like eventually I blew the tranny on it, and like I had to put money in it and then sell it for even less. But it proved at a certain point, like, yeah. What was I going to do? Just keep that truck forever? Like I just said, well, I have to take what I can get for this. I have to just sell it. This has become like, it doesn't matter what I paid for it. And so I'm fine with it. It's their super truck. Like you fucked up bad. Like you traded so many assets for a guy who played one kind of fake game his senior year. He played FCS. Like Minnesota passed on him. Basically, like the major college in his home state said they didn't want him. He ended up playing for NDSU. Like there was maybe some warning signs. He was great. He was great for, NDSU, but I mean, Chris, I can't say his name. Like there's plenty of good quarterbacks at FCS that have no business being drafted 3rd overall. So like we fucked up. Hey, we'll take whatever we can get for this. Like, what do you give me? I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Yeah, living high off the hog in small town Wisconsin was something, especially because like you could buy liquor basically 24/7 too.
Oh man. All right. So that's
where I'm at.
That's a fun parable. That's a fun parable. I'm gonna.
I mean, do you think it was like?
I'm gonna synthesize it, and
he has a chance to be good somewhere. Or do you think
what you described is, you had bad process. You were at a point in your life where you had assets and things were going well, and instead of making an investment in something that was practical, you went for the absurd, and the rest is history. And that's kind of what happened here. If you want to excuse the Niners in a small way, because that was the COVID draft and there was a it was a tricky time to really evaluate what was going on. Okay. There was lots of mistakes made in the previous draft and that draft. It was very, very tough to have a fair grade one way or the other on Trey Lance because you just hadn't seen enough of him. But that in and of itself probably should have been a bit of a warning sign. If you're going to quantify these players in terms of their player impact, his uncertainty bands were broader than any player drafted in NFL draft in the last 10 years, pretty clearly. And if you're going to take a guy third overall who has uncertainty bands that broad, you are going to live with this as an outcome. This was in the range of outcomes that he was never going to work out and that you were going to take an absolute bath on the assets you spent on him. It was also a pretty clear failure, in my opinion, process-wise, in terms of drafting a player that will fit your system, fit your culture, fit your timeline. Like, basically the Niners were coming off of a Super Bowl loss, correct? Am I wrong there? Or were they coming off of a year where Jimmy G was hurt? I don't 100% remember. They must have been coming off a hurt year because they were picking at near the top anyway. But whatever the case was, they had a win now team. A lot of players who were clearly at their prime, entering their prime on both sides of the ball. And they had Jimmy G on the roster, and they were basically using their draft capital that year as a little bit of a luxury and traded more future draft capital to move up and have the third best quarterback in the draft was the best that they were going to do.
Yeah, that trade was for Mac Jones.
Yeah. And, to the degree you already know with 100% certainty that you have your coach for as long as he wants to be there, then that input from the coach in terms of getting a player that was going to fit your system should have been, maybe higher on the list of decisions, higher on the list of this is why we took this guy, right? Should be, the coach's input should have maybe scored a little higher in the rubric of, the matrix of how are we going to come to this decision. Oh, look at that truck.
Look at that thing.
Jesus Christ. You look like that's like the, was that Needles truck in Back to the Future?
Yes.
You were like the bad guy in Back to the Future driving around rural Wisconsin. I love it. So yeah, I think it's pretty clearly a failure of process on a number of levels. A failure of process in terms of allocation of draft capital, even. It's almost, I really would be hesitant to ever criticize a team for using top 10 draft capital to take a quarterback, but this is one of those times where it was not obvious. And a lot of this is hindsight bias. A lot of the reactions are hindsight bias. I think the fact that you are going to escape consequences because you hit on Mr. Irrelevant is just the most wild kind of karmic. It is the most wild karmic karmic closure that I've ever heard or seen.
It was a weird ending to how that all went down. Off-season grade.
Okay, let me go through their let me go through their rankings because it's interesting. I have the Niners roster starters number 1 in the NFL, reserves number 9 in the NFL. So this is not just a good team; it actually has depth somehow. Skill group number 2, offense overall number 7, defense number 1, front 7 number 2, linebacking core number 1, defensive backfields I have number 12. The defensive back, all 3 levels are anchored by an elite player by my numbers. 2 of those are not controversial whatsoever. We're assuming Nick Bosa will be available week 1. His grade is...
The rumor mill caught up a little. It sounds like they're working it out. And it says he's playing week 1.
Yeah, I would think so too. Fred Warner, elite in the 2nd level. And maybe the most controversial of all my grades. Talanoa Hufanga, to me, graded out as elite last year. Am I on the right track there?
He had some bad games, but he made up for it with some very good games. Like, I think if you look at a game by game grade, you're going to see a bit of a different story.
Okay.
But just like straight, it's like when he was bad, he was real bad, like straight up missing fucking full assignments.
Okay.
But when he was good, he was so good.
Okay.
So don't hate it.
I have their offensive line as 14th. I have the interior offensive line as 16th. If you want to point to a unit where there is potential chaos, it is there. But I am dealing with a very specific recency bias issue where I was sure that offensive line injuries and depth was going to hurt these guys last year, and it did not. So I really don't know what to make of it. Shanahan has aces up his sleeve to neutralize pass rush. He has aces up his sleeve to neutralize offensive line weakness, and he seems to have gotten like last year's group. You said their protection rating was top 5, right?
Yeah, as far as pass pro ratings.
Okay. The sum of the parts, not top 5. No. Not. So they got somehow their ability to do their job exceeded the the sum of the parts from a talent standpoint, which again is a hallmark of a Kyle Shanahan system on offense, right? We shouldn't be surprised by this anymore. Like the guy gets more out of the parts on offense than you ever would have imagined. And oh, by the way, he now has like the best set of skill position players that, besides outside of Philly, he's got the best in the NFL. And they have depth and redundancy there now too, which is a little spooky. So I like being a bull on the Niners this year feels pretty foolish to me. Doubting these guys feels foolish. This being the year that they ultimately get it done, and Brock Purdy kind of cements takes the baton from Brady as the guy nobody believed in, that somehow, some way managed to win a guy with the I mean just gotta get by Jordan Love. But like that's like the key here. Like there is plenty of examples of teams that in recent-ish history where elite Hall of Famers all over this roster, like that's enough to get you into the that's enough to get you into the dance, and it's certainly enough to get you into the Super Bowl in this NFC.
It's funny too how the main ingredient, the first thing listed on the label for any other team's success has to be quarterback. So it's just it's a weird deal.
Well,
my offseason grade doesn't exist because essentially, I mean, they made a few moves here and there, but like their first 3 picks went to Miami and Carolina. They didn't do a lot of drafting. They didn't do a lot. They're kind of just running it back. Like, hey, I like the hire of Wilkes. He's it sucks to lose a defensive coordinator again. You could do a lot worse than Wilkes. I liked where they backfilled with what they had. I realized they didn't have much draft capital. They tried to find some depth here and there, and they traded Trey Lance to get rid of that distraction. So like it's like a B- for not having a scandal in the offseason. At least like you win by existing. You still have the team together.
Two last questions for you. The first one, before completely moving into schedule, and I'm fine with you. No grade. Why did the Cowboys trade for Wentz?
We don't have enough time for that. I have no idea.
I doubt they actually ever use him. I feel like they just want to pick his brain on like what's Shanahan up to.
Yeah, I think they
lost to the Niners twice in a row. Yeah, they wanted the playbook. Okay. And then
I would have traded that for the playbook.
Second question for you: if I wanted tickets to the NFC Championship game at the Field of Dreams this year, where would I go for those?
Oh, yes. And apologies to you guys who are watching the long version and not the split up, but technically this is a new podcast. So Ticketmaster, Drew, Ticketmaster, that's more memories are made. I'm going to get good at this the second time. When you're there for live NFL action, when you need tickets, Ticketmaster's got you covered as the official marketplace of the NFL. Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat with the interactive seat map, the 360-degree previews of your section to make sure you have the best view of these pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you that flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze. And you can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your team colors in the gold and red of the Niners. So find your tickets today at ticketmaster.com/NFL. If you can't remember a URL that long, it is in the show notes.
Yeah. And if you are planning to go to see the NFC Championship game at the Field of Dreams, it is in Santa Clara, California, not San Francisco.
Plan ahead.
Don't
it's like an hour and a half from the airport.
Don't book your tickets for SFO because you can't even get there on the BART yet. Book your tickets for San Jose. Very, very close to the field.
Long way from the ocean.
Yeah.
Basically, it's not even an ocean city. So,
yeah, that's right.
All right, let's take a look at the schedule. I think we've given them so much love. I think so. Here's the only real hard knock is they're playing a bunch of teams off buys.
Yeah, they really they got a tough draw. Not like Rams tough, but tough.
Yeah, they did end up with a bunch of rest disadvantaged spots, and in some cases they'll be playing at Cleveland, who's off their bye, and it's a road game where you have to travel for an early East Coast time zone game. So there's a couple of nasty double dippers, and I guess this is the only way the league can counteract the Shanahan effect is, well, let's make them play against teams that are coming off their bye every other week, make them fly to the Eastern time zone 4 different times for some earlier games, and try to take away some of their advantages, although there are still existing, obviously, Giants having to come out. That's a bad travel spot for them on a Thursday night, having to go to the West Coast. A shortish week there for the Giants, having to come out to the Bay. Not a super good spot. And then the other one too, the Monday night where Baltimore comes out and sees them. Nice travel advantage. Other than that, you got a tough game against Philly. You've got what's your second toughest game? And I know your eye's just going to be drawn to the center of the schedule with all the -1s, but what's your second toughest game besides at Philly?
Hosting Cincinnati. What about you?
Yeah, as much as I wanted to say Cleveland, just because of
you've been picking Dallas,
the extra situations, but Cincinnati's just a better team.
They're better offense. I look at Cincinnati as an offense that could definitely challenge you. Dallas
coming off a bye with
fair answer.
Prep sucks.
The funny thing is that the look ahead lines for Dallas, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Cincy and Jaguars and Seattle, that those are all so close, all in that -1-2 range. You know what I don't think is close? The power ratings on those teams. Dallas and Cincinnati is substantially better power rated than Cleveland, Minnesota, Jacksonville, or Seattle by my counts. That Cincy game with them coming off the bye is nasty. Cleveland is probably a scheduled loss at Cleveland. That's probably one where we're going to be making a case for Cleveland that day, and maybe being on a little bit of an island, depending on how Deshaun Watson looks through the first 4 weeks of the season.
You start 4-0. There's some definite sell spots in the Niners in that 4 or 5 stretch.
Hosting Dallas is a sell for sure.
Spread.
Hosting Dallas, hosting Cleveland is a sell. Versus Cincinnati is a sell. So, I guess first 8 weeks of the season, I can see the Niners being in a similar kind of deal as last year, where we got a couple of surprising losses in there, and maybe even a couple of predictable losses. But if they get to their bye week 9 and this team is 5-3, despite being as talented as they are, not hitting the panic button, not going to be surprised. This team finishes with an absolute, just a glorious stretch. You have the one at Philly test week 13, but all of the rest of those games from week 11 on, and maybe really week 10 if you want to qualify the Jags game too, from week 10 on, you should be able to sprint home and snag the 1 seed. And spoiler alert, I have the Niners as the most likely 1 seed in the NFC by a lot. And it's because of the division. It's because I have very little distinguishing Philly and Dallas to win their division, and the consequence of not winning your division is road. Right?
I want this is just a two-way market. It's 4-0 versus the field. 4-0 versus Arizona and the Rams versus any other result percentage.
Ooh. 4-0 versus Arizona and the Rams is minus 400, and any other result is plus 400 at the no vig house.
You got Arizona off the bye though. Rams early in the season though.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd probably take the other side of that.
Yeah, no, I think actually
it's a little heavy, minus 200.
If you math that out, it's probably gonna be like minus 180ish. But those two Arizona games,
it still feels like the floor. I mean, the main point is with that division, the floor just instantly gets a boost. Especially if you're able to win versus Seattle, even just a split versus Seattle, a quick 5-1 in division. You get some of these wins against, Tampa Bay. You get the win against, these other East Coast teams, Washington, Baltimore. Baltimore's a tough one. It's at home, though. Like, you can definitely win these games. You can win all the games on this schedule. Again, like, your ceiling is just, you won all the games. That happens, every 30, 40 years. Something like that can happen if a team's good enough and things bounce their way. But the floor is just so high. Like you said, it's so hard to not look at their division odds and kind of laugh.
Yeah. I have the Niners as the most likely division winner. I have their 1 seed price is a little short. Short is in value. I think it should be a little shorter, I guess, so it's a little long, whatever the case is. There's value in 1 seed for the Niners. And if they really, really, really do pop, then Shaney, coach of the year, is going to be in the conversation.
I know. I get it. He's behind the 8 ball because the team has won so many games last year. But if you can continue to do it with the quarterbacks he's doing it with, and they win 14, 15 games, 30, 33 to do.
Yeah. Can you pull up the schedule one more time, Dan? Because I got a question for Andy. All of this bloviating about how amazing the Niners are. I do not have a Niners ticket in my account for anything.
I just have the Shanny ticket. That's it so far.
Am I being greedy, trying to wait for maybe a little chaos early against Pittsburgh, Giants, Dallas?
Probably.
Like, am I being greedy, hoping that we see a repeat of last year and that this team is like 3-4 and people doubt them? Because my anticipation is, I don't know how it will happen, but there will be a buy low opportunity on the Niners.
It's hard to see with those first 8 games. Like, those are tough. The Dallas through Cincy schedule's tough. That's kind of it. That's your buy spot. If there's a 2-2 in there, 1-3, God willing, then there's a buy spot. But you need to. They almost need to have a hiccup in those first 4 games for you to have it. I might just, I'm not saying go take their win total or go make the playoff price or something, just with no good return. Like to win the 1 seed, to represent the NFC, like some of those prices, I'd probably just grab them now. I'm just a little
grab them now. Okay.
I'm just a little more hesitant to think there's going to be this nasty hiccup. Although, we did see it last year. It was a bit of a slow start. You've had another year to scheme McCaffrey into this offense. Honestly, terrified to see what they do against Arizona in Week 4.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good deal. You want to check out?
And yes, the Rams. If the Rams starters are not good on defense, that could be something. Like
Jesus, it could. So this is why I asked, because the Super Bowl price is 10-1. The NFC is 4-1. Those aren't really getting you out of bed in the morning. Those aren't quite the type of futures you're dying to lock in now, right? They would probably be dogs if they faced the Bills or the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That's my guess. They would probably be dogs if they do not get the 1 seed and they have to go on the road in the NFC Championship game against Philly or Dallas. The market rates those teams all about the same.
Do you know what the 1 seed price is now?
No, what is it?
It's basically the NFC price. Like You go to FanDuel right now to get the 1 seed. It's Eagles 350, Niners 400. So
yeah, I think
that
that's
isn't.
It's not crazy. I just keep an eye on that market because they keep that up all year. The NFC West price should be like minus 250. To make the playoffs price, yes, should be like minus infinity. Win total over under 10.5. Juice to the over. I get it. Not doubting these guys in any which way, but I have yet to, as aforementioned, I have not pulled the trigger on a single Niners bet because I'd like to see Purdy in action. I think, and spoiler alert, I like the Steelers week 1. I think they can upset them with Purdy coming in, and some of the lack of continuity swirling at some key positions there, particularly on the offensive line. So I think you could see a slow start for these guys, and I don't think it matters. I think they're still going to win the NFC.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the exotic markets too. It's like to go 6-0 in the division is plus 375, which is, don't bet that, please. But they do have at Caesars. There's over unders on division wins. There's a set at 4.5. Little juice to the under, plus 120 to the over.
Oh, okay, that's a fun one. That's a really fun one. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about range of outcomes. We know what the ceiling is. It's Super Bowl. What is the
non-injury floor?
Yeah.
I mean, with that schedule, there's still a lot of good teams. There's a lot of good teams you're playing on the road as well. Like
if you're this team
going 10-7, like that's.
So you think three or 4 seed could be possible? You think they could be a 3 seed?
Yeah, if they struggle in some of those spots where the teams are well rested, that team focuses all their energy for 2 weeks on scheming, figure something out. I mean, the Bengals have very good offense. Baltimore could be very good this year again. Minnesota, Cleveland, Dallas, Philly. Like, you could lose 6-7 games for sure. It's, as high as we are, this team, things happen. Balls don't bounce your way. We see this every year where a great team loses to some team they have no business losing to. So there's probably one bad one. They had 3 of them last year where this team ended up in a bad game against a bad team. And how many games did Atlanta win last year?
They won 7. They were one of the 3 teams that won 7 and 10 because there was a 3-way tie, Andy.
Atlanta was the best team out of those because I'm pretty sure Denver was like 5 and whatever. I can't do the math anymore. 17, 5-12.
Yeah, I don't know who the number 2 would be. 5.
Yeah, their range is like 12.
I guess it'd be the Pack. Like if the Packers absolutely pop, they could get a top 2 seed. I'm fine with that.
Oh yeah, the Minnesota Vikings,
the Lions,
and the
good
Packers,
too. The Vikings, good, yeah.
Those all have range of outcomes where their offense is good enough to win a lot of games.
Yeah, I agree with that. And their division's weak, and their schedules are weak.
Maybe even the Cowboys.
Same Saints and Falcons. Cowboys. Well, the Cowboys. In this world where the Niners are the 3 seed, that means that the NFC East winner is the 1 or the 2 for sure. Yeah, and then one other surprise.
Probably the North.
I don't believe in the Saints enough to put them in that conversation, but other people do. I don't believe in the Vikings enough to put them in that conversation. Other people do. I don't believe in the Lions enough to put them in that conversation. Other people do. Packers or Falcons would be a fun one to get a top 2 seed. All that said, I'm not afraid of the Niners winning on the road against a team like that in the 2-3. So I think range of outcomes to the bad for the Niners is like NFC Championship game on the road. Like, honestly, I don't see a downside that's much worse than that outside of catastrophic injury to some like bus crash type of shit we're talking about.
Multiple cluster injuries that your secondary is devastated. Oh, Christian McCaffrey missed 10 games. Multiple skill position players in the offense missed significant time. Purdy isn't it. Shanahan is in a coma. The stadium burnt down.
Yeah.
The end of
earthquake swallows up the team.
The end of Homer practice. At the bat, where somebody's somebody has giantism, somebody falls in a pit.
this San Andreas fault rips the stadium open in half, and they lose half the team to the depths of
my range of outcomes is like 10 to 15 wins.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. What has to happen to the good for the Niners to win the Super Bowl, in your opinion? Just Brock Purdy and everybody stays healthy, and Brock Purdy takes another step forward.
That's healthy offense. Healthy offense. Secondaries takes a little step forward, and the offense stays healthy. Steve Saxon is running with the law. Goddamn bad today. So, betting plan is I feel like I'm a little short on Niners. We didn't talk awards, and I love that someone brought that up on Seattle. But
Purdy MVP in your range.
It's hard because the price is kind of low, and I don't think he gets the credit. It's like, oh,
that's the magical point.
Yeah, he doesn't get the credit. Offensive player of the year. Somebody in the Discord. So I was talking about the fucking tome I wrote on offensive rookie of the year. I wrote too much today. I got a little too deep in the weeds. But offensive player of the year, we're talking about like how many players are actually viable to win offensive player of the year. And I said the top 5 receivers, then like 10 quarterbacks. But I kind of missed one. And Christian McCaffrey somebody said they bet him at like 20 to 1. He could have in this offense, and I know there's other mouths to feed, but there's
pretty important.
There's a path to like 2,500 yards and 15 touchdowns between, 2,500 combined yards, obviously not rushing. Like he could have a very outstanding season where, all right, here's the best quarterback, they get MVP, but Jesus, Christian McCaffrey, and they won 15 games and he ran for 1,400 yards and caught another, like if he has 1,000 season, which is in the range of outcomes, there's a path for him. If I had to go one award, I think that's the one I would like the most for the Niners. Just because you're not going to get, and they've done it twice in the last 10 years. It's tough to win defensive player of the year twice in a row, even though I just mentioned it has happened. Obviously rookie of the year isn't happening. They don't have any. They didn't draft it. Close your eyes and name a player that the 49ers drafted this year, Drew. Yeah. They didn't draft remember. Third round, Drew.
I can't. No. I'm trying to remember what positional group was it? A secondary piece, cornerback, or something.
Yeah, now we've just resigned ourselves to trying to name they drafted 3 players in the third round.
One of them was a corner. One of them was safety. Yeah, safety.
Jair
I don't remember the tight end. Who's the tight end?
Cameron Latu, Bama.
Oh, did he get cut?
And they drafted the.
Oh, he's on IR. Okay.
He's hurt.
Okay. Jake Moody, the kicker. They took a kicker in round 3. Ugh. Oh, boy. Don't love special teams on the Rams.
I think it's funny too. I mean, he's their kicker. He's going to be their kicker. But Dan pointed out or somebody said it. I think Dan was mentioning something around the hey, we're not any good at drafting. Why should we even keep these? We're not going to find a Christian McCaffrey if he gave us 100 picks. Let's just trade 5 for him. Okay, that works.
Okay, deal.
Cool. If you had to make a bet on the Niners right now, if you had to make a season-long bet, which one would you like? Kind of as a closer here.
Super Bowl. 10 to 1.
Super Bowl, just 10 to 1 Super Bowl because that gets shorter.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a scenario where that's 3, 4, 5 to 1 with them. What is the price going into the playoffs if they have the 1 seed? So I'm trying to think what Phillies was going in. Obviously there were so many good. That's the thing. Oh, there's so many good AFC teams. Yeah, you only got to play one.
You only got to play one. You have the benefit. We know you have the benefit of an imbalanced bracket.
So, you're basically playing a team you should be favored by at least a touchdown over at home, a good team in the NFC Championship where you should be a 3-point favorite maybe.
Yeah.
And then a slight dog in the Super Bowl. So what are those money lines? 300, 200, and even?
Yeah, that sounds right. The Eagles were in the 5 to 1 range. entering the playoffs round last year.
1.5.
I think there was still some doubt that Hurts was going to get any wins in the playoffs.
3-1.
Yeah, I think actually I'm not even sure the Eagles were the shortest. The Niners were favorites in the NFC last year entering the playoffs at plus 450. This is Super Bowl price. So they were, as a 2 seed last year, Andy, they were plus 450 heading in, which means as a 2 seed this year, you would expect something like plus 450. And as a 1 seed this year, you would expect something like plus 300.
Yeah, 275, 300, something along those lines. So.
Sam, you bring up a golden point that I did not cover, and I got to say it. Shanny, I would love some evidence-based reason to believe that Shanny is learning how to be a more aggressive in-game decision maker this season. Would love it, because he is still very much a question mark when it comes to putting away a lead, even the most historic lead in Super Bowl history that was lost. And just in general, like having the killer instinct to beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl as the Niners coach was a little lacking. So I will not. You can doubt him for losing 2 NFC Championship games on the road, but both of those were a little fluky. The Rams one, if they were a little more aggressive, they probably win. But really, they just needed Tart to catch that damn interception. I say, damn, I wanted the Rams to win that game. But yeah, if they do intercept Stafford in the third quarter, the game is over. So they were close.
Yeah, can they do it on a cold, rainy night in Lambeau though? We'll see.
You think it's gonna be raining in late January in Lambeau?
We get these. It's called the January thaw.
You're buying into the climate. I forget what the stupid.
It's like 95 degrees this week. I buy into anything now.
You're buying into. Yeah, no, I'm obviously being facetious. Climate change is
real.
Yeah, very very real. All right, good job.
Let's call it a podcast. We'll be pre-recording one for Labor Day, guys, like we always do. We won't be live for that one. Hopefully, we don't say anything that makes us look stupid over the things that happen on the weekend. But
congratulations to the Jacksonville Jaguars on trading for Nick Bosa. That really does take their defense to a championship level.
But then, mark your calendars. Next Wednesday, every game. Oh, yeah. I'm pumped. I like those a lot.
Also,
it's part of my process, baby.
We got bonus content coming for your Labor Day weekend, so we are not leaving you in the lurch to barbecue without good NFL content. Did you already say that?
Yeah, we're going to pre-record kind of our summation.
Yes.
Our final arguments.
I'm going to call it the capstone episode.
Oh, I like that.
Yes.
So look for that Monday as you're lounging around the grill. And check you guys on Twitter. Check you guys in the Discord. Hit the thumbs up on the way out. That would be really appreciative. If you buy some tickets, support Ticketmaster, I suppose. That'd be great too. And we'll catch you guys next week, Wednesday, live.
So,
I was wondering if there was a thing that I had forgot about, but no, Drew just wasn't listening.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Drew spaced a little there.
I spaced because I got Wozniacki in this wild, weird Captain Speedo thing.
That she's wearing it again. Adidas.